Vivian Cross was 38 years old when she won $100 million on a Tuesday afternoon in October. And she was still 38 years old 40 minutes later when she pulled into her own driveway in Memphis, Tennessee, with a ticket in the inside pocket of her work coat and a feeling in her chest that she had never felt before and would never quite feel again in exactly that form, which was the particular joy of a thing so large she could not yet see its edges. She drove a 2010 Corolla with a crack in the passenger side mirror that she had been meaning to fix for 2 years. She bought her lunch at the deli on Poplar most mornings because it was cheaper than the restaurants near her office. She wore her good earrings on days when she had court appearances and her ordinary ones on days when she did not. And the people who shared the elevator in her building had been sharing it with her for 3 years and mostly did not know her name. What they did not know, and what her husband Gregory had long since stopped trying to know, was that Vivian Cross had practiced tax law for 14 years with a precision and a depth of understanding that her partners described, when she was not in the room, as the kind of thing that made other attorneys grateful she was on their side. She had won $100 million. She knew, before she reached the end of her street, exactly how she was going to hold it. She had not yet told a single person. Gregory's car was in the driveway. She had expected that. He worked from home on Tuesdays. She did not expect the second car parked at the curb, a silver sedan she did not recognize, recently washed, with a parking sticker from the hospital district 2 miles away. She sat in the Corolla for 11 seconds. Then, she went inside. What Gregory did not know, reaching for her ticket 7 days later in a conversation he had prepared as carefully as he had prepared anything in his life, was that the ticket had been legally assigned to a trust in Vivian's name the morning after she found it, by an estate attorney she had called from her car that same Tuesday evening, before she went back inside the house and made dinner and did not say a word. What happened when Gregory reached for something that no longer legally existed in a form he could touch was the only ending that the situation had ever been going to have. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The Tuesday had begun the way most of her Tuesdays began, which was with a 4:30 alarm and a pot of coffee she made herself in the kitchen of the house in East Memphis, where she and Gregory had lived for 6 years. A house with a front porch she had rebuilt board by board the first summer they were there, because the previous owner had let it go, and she was not a woman who left fixable things unfixed. She had replaced the boards herself over 3 weekends, working methodically from the top step down, learning the rhythm of it the way she learned most physical things, which was by doing it incorrectly once and correctly every time after that. The kitchen smelled of the coffee and the cedar she kept in a small pot on the windowsill, which had been her mother's habit and was now hers. She poured a cup and sat at the table with the brief she was preparing for a Thursday hearing, an estate tax matter involving a trust that had been structured incorrectly by the originating attorney, and which she had spent 3 weeks untangling to the point where she could now see the full shape of what needed to be rebuilt. Her father, a man named Curtis Cross, who had driven route deliveries for 30 years in Memphis before his knees gave out, and who had died of a stroke when Vivian was 29, and in her second year of practice, had told her when she was in law school that the best legal minds he ever met were the ones who could hold the whole picture in their head without losing any of the corners. He said most people only saw what was in front of them. He said the ones who saw the corners were the ones who won. He said she was one of those people, and he wanted her to know it before she was far enough in to have figured it out for herself. She had thought about that often since he died. She thought about it now, sitting with her brief and her coffee in the house that was quiet at 4:30 in the way it had always been quiet when Gregory slept, which was deeply and without interruption. which was one of the first things she had noticed about him when they shared a bed, and one of the last things she thought about him now with any warmth. She and Gregory had met at a tax law symposium in Nashville 8 years before this morning. He was a financial planner with a good practice and a genuine curiosity about the legal side of estate planning, which was the territory they shared professionally, and which had given them, in the early years, a language in common that made conversation easy and interesting. He was organized and direct, and he had a way of making plans that suggested he took the future seriously, which she had found at the time to be a quality worth attaching herself to. She understood later that the plans he took seriously had always been his own. The marriage had been right for the first 4 years, and then had become the kind of wrong that moved so slowly you did not notice it was moving until it had moved very far. He had grown indifferent in the particular way of men who had decided they had already secured what they needed and no longer required the effort that securing it had taken. He stopped asking about her cases. He stopped attending things that were important to her professionally. He made decisions about their shared finances without consulting her, which she had addressed twice, and which had changed once, and then reverted. He kept his phone face down on surfaces. He developed habits she did not recognize and could not locate the origin of. She had been watching for a year. She had not yet had enough. The lottery ticket had come from the gas station, where she stopped every Tuesday on the way to the office. A habit she had maintained for 4 years because her father had bought lottery tickets there when she was a child, and she had taken up the habit after he died as the kind of small continuation that did not need to make sense to anyone else. She bought 2 tickets every Tuesday morning. She checked them every Tuesday evening when she remembered. She had won $11 across 4 years of trying, and had always considered that a reasonable return on the investment. She checked the ticket in her car in the parking structure below her office building at 5:40 in the afternoon, having just finished the last call of her day, and she read the numbers twice before she understood them, and then she sat in the car for a very long time. She was a tax attorney. She knew, in the precise way that a tax attorney knew things, that a lottery win of this size produced a federal tax liability, a state tax liability, a lump sum versus annuity decision with cascading estate implications, a reporting obligation, and a set of structural decisions that, if made incorrectly in the first 72 hours, could cost the winner a material percentage of what they had won and expose them to claims they had not anticipated. She called no one. She drove home. She held the particular joy of it in the car, like something fragile and lit from the inside, turning it carefully, looking at its edges, trying to understand what it was and what it was going to become. She had $100 million. She had a profession that told her exactly how to hold it. She had a husband she had not fully trusted in 16 months. She was planning before she reached her own street. She saw the silver sedan at the curb 4 houses down. She noted it without yet attaching meaning to it. She pulled into the driveway. She sat in the car for 11 seconds, not out of hesitation, but out of the professional habit of pausing before entering any situation with incomplete information. Then she went inside. The house was quiet in the way that a house was quiet when it had occupants trying to be quieter than they ordinarily were. She was a woman who had spent 14 years listening to what was said in rooms and what was not said, learning the difference between silence that was empty and silence that was full. This silence was full. She set her bag on the hook by the door. She set her keys on the entry table, which she had refinished herself the year before, taking it down to the original wood and resealing it in a matte finish the hardware store man had helped her select, because she knew the outcome she wanted but not the product that would produce it, and she was a woman who asked when she did not know. She walked through the kitchen. She walked to the hall that led to the back of the house. The door of the guest room was not fully closed. She stood in the hall, and she listened, and she understood, in the complete and irreversible way of understanding something you cannot unknow, what the silver sedan at the curb and the quiet of the house and the partly closed door all added up to. Her hands did not shake. She had $100 million in her coat pocket. She had 14 years of professional training. She had her father's voice, which said, "See the corners." She went back to the kitchen. She poured a glass of water from the tap. She stood at the sink and looked at the yard through the window, at the cedars she could not see from this angle but knew was there. She held the ticket in her mind, and she held what she had just understood, and she let them both be present at the same time, which required a stillness she had not previously known she possessed. She reached into the inside pocket of her work coat and took out the ticket. She looked at it for a moment in the kitchen light. Then she placed it back in the pocket and took out her phone. She did not call Gregory. She called her estate attorney, a woman named Patricia Amos, who had been her personal attorney for 7 years and whose practice was built entirely around high-value estate and trust planning, and who answered her personal line even at this hour, because she was the kind of attorney who understood that the most consequential decisions happened outside of business hours. Patricia picked up on the third ring. Patricia said she would be there at 6:30. She did not ask questions that evening. She was a woman who understood that the right question at the wrong time was the same as the wrong question, and the time for questions was the morning, when she had the documents in front of her, and the coffee in her hand, and the full picture to work from. Vivian set the phone on the counter. She heard the guest room door open, and footsteps in the hall, and then Gregory's voice, slightly elevated and calibrated with the particular effort of a man who had not expected to hear her car in the driveway and was now computing how much adjustment was required. She said she was in the kitchen. She asked how his day had been. He said fine. He asked how hers had been. She said it had been interesting. She said she had a lot of paperwork to finish and would be at her desk most of the evening. He said he would order dinner. She said that would be nice. She went to the third bedroom, and she worked until midnight, and the brief she had been preparing was substantially complete when she stopped, which was the correct outcome, regardless of the circumstances. The trust was established at 7:45 the following morning. Patricia had prepared the instrument in 2 hours the night before, working from the specifications Vivian had described on the phone, which were precise enough that the document required only one revision. The ticket was assigned to the trust at 9:03. Patricia prepared a certification documenting the assignment date, the exact time, and the full chain of custody from the moment of ticket purchase through the moment of legal transfer, because she was a woman who understood that the document prepared before a dispute was the most powerful document in any proceeding that followed. The 7 days between the ticket assignment and Gregory's discovery were the quietest 7 days Vivian had spent in years. She went to work. She came home. She made dinner twice. She asked about his day and listened to the answers. She slept without difficulty, which she had not expected, but which made a kind of sense she understood without examining it. She had already done what needed to be done, and the rest was simply waiting for the wait to arrive. Vivian told no one else. She went to the office. She filed a claim with the Lottery Commission through Patricia's firm, under the trust's name, as she had been entitled to do under the terms of the lottery rules that she had read twice the previous evening. She worked the Thursday hearing. She came home Thursday evening and made dinner and asked Gregory about his day, and he told her, and she listened. She called her older sister, Beverly, on Friday night, from her car, parked 2 blocks from the house in the direction away from the deli and the gas station, just far enough that she was alone with the call. She told Beverly about the ticket and about what she had found when she came home, and about the trust in Patricia, and the 7 days of silence. Beverly said nothing for a full 30 seconds, which was the longest Vivian had ever heard Beverly silent under any circumstances. And then Beverly exhaled the way people exhaled when they were trying to locate the beginning of a response to something that had too many beginnings. Beverly said, "You won $100 million and you didn't call me." Vivian said, "I was working." Beverly said, "And the other thing?" Vivian said, "I was working on that too." Beverly said, "Does Gregory know about the win?" Vivian said, "Not yet." Beverly said, "When are you going to tell him?" Vivian said, "When it's the right time." Beverly, who was 4 years older than Vivian and who had told Vivian in the 3rd year of the marriage that something in Gregory's manner had changed in a way she could not name but trusted, said, "How much time are you giving him?" Vivian said, "I'm giving him exactly as much as he gives himself." Preparation was the work. Everything else was just the moment it paid off. Gregory found out on a Tuesday, exactly 1 week after the ticket had been purchased, which was the day the Lottery Commission's public announcement listed the trust as the winning claim holder. His phone rang at 9 in the morning. Vivian was at the office. He called her 3 minutes later. His voice was careful and large with a thing he was trying to contain. He said he had seen the announcement. He said he didn't understand the trust structure. He said they needed to talk. She said she would be home at 6. She was home at 6. She had brought Patricia. She had also called her Uncle Desmond, her father's brother, the man who had been the first person in the family to tell her she should go to law school, who at 67 still practiced civil litigation in Memphis, from an office he had owned for 30 years, and who had driven across town and was sitting in her kitchen when she arrived, drinking the coffee Patricia had made, because Desmond had always arrived where he was needed before he was asked to. Gregory sat across the kitchen table from 3 attorneys. He had not called his own. He had not anticipated needing one. Patricia laid out the trust instrument, the assignment certification with the time-stamped chain of custody, the Lottery Commission's claim record, the trust's full asset register, which listed the winning ticket and its claimed value at the lump sum election of $4 million after federal withholding, the amount Patricia and Vivian had discussed and elected the week before. Desmond looked at Gregory across the table with the particular expression of a man who had seen this kind of room many times and had never once been on the wrong side of it. Gregory said she should have told him. He said this was their win, not hers alone. He said he was her husband, and lottery winnings during a marriage were marital assets. Desmond said that was an interesting question, and that the answer to it depended substantially on when the ticket was purchased, when it was assigned, and when the marriage could be demonstrated to have been materially compromised prior to the win. He said he had pulled the relevant case law that morning, and he had some thoughts. Gregory said he would contest the trust assignment. Patricia said he was welcome to. She placed a 4th document on the table. It was a record from the security system Vivian had installed at the front door 18 months prior, a system Gregory had known existed and had never thought about in the specific terms that Patricia had now thought about it, which was as a dated and time-stamped record of who had been in the house and when. The record showed 16 entries by a person other than Vivian or Gregory during the previous 14 months, each one on a Tuesday, each one between the hours of 2 and 5 in the afternoon. She said the document spoke to the question of when the marriage had been materially compromised. She said it would be produced in any proceeding. Gregory looked at the security record. He looked at Vivian. Vivian looked at him with the same steady attention she brought to a hearing, the complete and neutral calm of a woman who had already done the work and was now simply present for the outcome. She said, "You sat across from me for 7 days knowing what you had done and what I had won, And you said nothing except that we needed to talk. She said she had spent those 7 days preparing. She said she was ready to talk now if he was. He said nothing. She said, I'll be petitioning for divorce next week. She said Patricia had the paperwork. She said she wanted the process to be clean, and she imagined he did too. She stood. She picked up her work coat from the back of the chair, the same coat the ticket had ridden home in 8 days ago. She nodded to Patricia and to Desmond. She walked through the kitchen and out the side door and onto the porch she had rebuilt herself 6 years ago, in the cool October evening, and she stood for a moment with the yard around her and the sound of the neighborhood settling into the dark. She did not look back at the kitchen. 11 months later, Vivian Cross lived in a house she had purchased and renovated in Germantown, a neighborhood east of Memphis with old trees and wide porches. A house with a back garden she had planted from scratch using native species she had researched and ordered from a nursery in the hill country. Because she was a woman who believed in building things that were suited to the ground they grew in. The trust had been structured by Patricia into a holding vehicle with 4 sub-accounts, a charitable foundation she had established in her father's name, a real estate investment portfolio managed by a firm she had selected after 3 months of due diligence, a private investment account she managed herself with the same methodical rigor she applied to her clients' estates, and a personal account she used for what she privately called the life account, which was the one she drew from to pay for the porch restoration and the native garden and the trip to Portugal she had taken with Beverly in the spring. A man named Solomon, who was a civil engineer she had met through the Charitable Foundation's first grant recipient, had been at her table more evenings than not for the previous 4 months, in the easy, undemanding way of someone who had come into a space already made and found that it suited him. He asked about her cases. He remembered what she had told him the last time. He did not perform his attention. He simply had it, which she had come to understand was the rarer quality. Gregory had retained his own attorney in November and filed a challenge to the trust assignment in December. The challenge was resolved in April, in Vivian's favor on the strength of the assignment certification, the chain of custody record, and the security system documentation, which the court had found dispositive on the question of when the marital relationship had been materially impaired. Desmond had argued the motion. He had taken no fee. He had called her afterward and said, "Your father would have been in that courtroom whether you asked him or not." She had held that for a long time. Gregory had settled the divorce separately, in March, for the equitable portion of the marital assets that existed prior to the winning ticket, which was the number Patricia and Vivian had calculated and offered from the beginning. He had moved to a rental in East Memphis. His financial planning practice had contracted in the months following the public announcement, which disclosed the trust's name and which anyone who knew the family could connect to the divorce. Clients asked questions. Some did not stay to hear the answers. Vivian heard these things from Beverly, who heard them from people who told Beverly things, and she noted them without gloating, which was easier than people might have assumed, because she genuinely did not require his diminishment to feel the full measure of what she had built. On an October morning 11 months after the Tuesday she had won and come home and found what she found. She sat on the new porch with her coffee and the early light coming through the oak canopy she had not planted, but had chosen the house to be under. And she was quiet for a long time in the particular way that was no longer the quiet of a woman managing what she had not yet named, but the quiet of a woman who had named everything and set it in its correct place. She had built everything worth keeping. She had kept every corner. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.